This is page 344. We're going to do numbers 8 and number 9, and we're going to skip number 10. Number 8 reads, Ty borrowed $500 from his parents. The graph shows how much he owes them each month if he pays back a certain amount. A says, describe the relationship between the number of months and the amount Ty owes. Identify an independent and dependent variable and explain your thinking. So there's several things to do there. Notice along the x-axis we have the months, and along the y-axis we have the amount Ty owes in dollars. And notice that we start at 0 months, and at 0 months he owes 500, and then we go to 1 month, and at 1 month he owes 450, and then at 2 months he owes 400, and at 3 months he owes 350, and it just goes on. Now what we can't see as well from a graph as we could see on a table is this, and I'm going to show you how making a table could be helpful. So what's happening there? You may have caught it when I went over it, but maybe you didn't. So what's happening here is this. So I'm going to put the months as my first variable, and I'm going to put the amount that he owes as my second variable. And at 0 months he owes how much? 500. We already talked about that. At 1 month he owes 450. At 2 months he owes 400. At 3 months he owes 350. At this point you probably notice what's happening. As the months go by, he owes $50 less each time, and that's the first answer we're looking for. Under A, when it says describe the relationship, what's happening is this. Ty owes $50 less each month. Or again, another way of saying that would be, we could say that he's paying $50 a month. So after 0 months he owes 500, and then he owes 450, and then he owes 400, then he owes 350. It's decreasing by $50. So as the months pass, the amount he owes is decreasing by $50. So the second thing we're supposed to do is identify the independent and dependent variable. The amount Ty owes depends on the number of months. Now that doesn't technically answer the question yet, but I'm about to. The amount Ty owes depends on the number of months. So the amount is the dependent variable. And the months are the independent variable. And I'm going to review with you something. And that is this. The x-axis is almost always the independent variable, and the y-axis is almost always the dependent variable. Pay attention to that. It's only when there's a mistake, or there's once in a while where there is no independent and dependent variable, but almost always the y values depend on the x values. So therefore the x is the independent and the y is the dependent, almost always. Question B, how long will it take Ty to pay back his parents? So at 0 months he owes 500, and payback means he doesn't owe them anything. So it's not going to be 1 month because he still owes 450. It's not going to be 2 months because he still owes 400. It's not going to be 3 months. It's going to be all the way down here when he owes 0. When does he owe 0? He owes 0 at what? Right here. He owes 0 at 10 months. At 10 months, he owes 0, so that's when he pays back his parents. The answer to 8B is 10 months. All right, cool. Let's move on to number 9. You can go down to number 10 and write skip. And we're on number 9. And number 9 reads, error analysis. That's a clue. A discount store has a special 8 cans of juice for $8. A shopper decides that since the number of cans purchased is 8 times the number of dollars spent, the cost is the independent variable, and the number of cans is the dependent variable, and do you agree? Well, I'm going to use my clues here, and I'm going to notice these words error analysis. And then when I see this do you agree right here and explain, I'm going to think the answer must be disagree. So I'm going to write that right here. They're telling us to disagree, so I'm going to disagree. Now we just have to figure out why. I'm going to write I disagree because. I'm going to give you a hint where we need to look. We need to look right here. They've got the variables backwards. They're saying that the cost is the independent variable and the number of cans is the dependent variable. So if we had that on a graph, it would look like this. The cost is the independent variable, so that would be down here. And then the number of cans would be the dependent variable. And that doesn't look too crazy unless we want to think about this. Remember, we just talked about how we said that the y-axis is typically the dependent variable. So the number of cans depends on the cost. That's what they're saying. But I wonder if we think this is an error, I wonder what we could do. Could we switch these? If we switch those, it would look like this, where the number of cans would go down here and the cost would go up here. Cost in dollars. And let's see if that one makes sense. This is what the shopper said. And we say we disagree because the question told us to. So we switched it to this one right here. So let's see if this makes sense. Could the cost depend on the number of cans? Does that make more sense? Could the cost of the juice depend on how many cans you buy? Think about those words. The cost depends on how many cans you buy. Well, of course that makes sense. I just said the words the cost depends on the number of cans you buy. And that makes perfect sense. Because if you go shopping and you put some cans in your cart, you're going to have to pay some money. How much money are you going to have to pay? The answer is that depends on how many cans you're buying. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take these words and we're going to put them into our answer. I disagree because the cost will depend on the number of cans, which makes the cost the dependent variable and the number of cans the independent variable. And if you go back and read what they wrote, they have this backwards. I know that's a little bit tricky, but our words here make more sense than their words there. They say the cost is the independent variable, and we know that the cost is the dependent. It's the key. The key is right here. We know that the cost is the. I'm going to change that to green highlighter. We know that the cost is the dependent variable, and we know that the number of cans is the independent variable. All right, good job. You are done with page 344.